Call to order.
Recording in progress.
That's all right. I call to order this September 28th, 2022 meeting of the Public Safety Committee. Roll call, please. Here. Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Item 2A, the approval and amendment of the agenda. Committee members see anything they want to make any changes or any additions to the? Nope. Seeing none, the agenda stands as submitted. Are there any, we have two citizen comment opportunities in this meeting. The first is right now. If there's anybody online or anybody in the room that want to approach the podium, please tell us your name and address, and you'll be given 3 minutes to discuss any topic you wish under public safety. Anybody? No? Okay. Thank you. I'll close citizen comments. We have a city administrator's report tonight. Thank you very much, Madam City Administrator. Number 5 are the reports of the committee chairs and aldermen. I'm the chairman. I have no report to give tonight. Alderwoman Sims is not here tonight. Alderman Lockmuller?
I have nothing.
Thank you. Alderwoman O'Neill? Thank you very much. We come to our department reports. The first is the fire department.
So, good evening, committee. Appreciate the time to speak with you this evening once again. As you note at your positions in the agenda document, our department staffing, we are almost at full staff now. We had a new employee start on the 24th. Mr. Anthony DiPaolo comes to us from St. Louis City Fire Department, where he was on the EMS side, working as a paramedic for 5 years. He seems to be squared away. Took him around the city on his first day to get uniforms and had good discussions. So got a good vibe from Tony. Ongoing, East Central. So the new CAD system, Motorola Premier One, was launched on Monday. As you can imagine, with a new computerized system, there are going to be a few hiccups and bugs along the way. East Central has been very receptive for the daily and hourly feedback that we've been giving based off the types of calls we're running and the information we are or are not receiving on those calls. Regardless of what's happening within the system, all 911 calls that were dispatched were responded to in a timely manner. So essentially right now we're just looking at some computer bugs and little nuances within the system. So we're good with that. Probably the other thing to mention with this new system is that it's based off AVL, automatic vehicle location. So the closest appropriate unit will be dispatched on life threat calls and loss of property, which could be a car fire or structure fire. Closest appropriate resource regardless of jurisdictional boundary. The other thing to keep in mind is regardless of that type of call for AVL, there will always be a Brentwood unit dispatched. It might not be a fire truck or an ambulance, it could be myself or Chief Cottrell, but there will be a Brentwood unit on scene for every call in Brentwood. Chief Cottrell is not here this evening because he is currently in North Carolina. He should be at the dinner right now for the EMSMC, which is our billing partner for EMS. Medicare is going to be modifying the reimbursement schedule, and this conference is a way for EMSMC to leverage all the opportunities so that we get the maximum amount on our ambulance billing for the calls that we're running. Ongoing equipment needs. I'm sure you all saw in the floods in July and August that our current fire marshal was using a privately owned drone to get high resolution damage assessment videos. Because that process was done with a private drone, it's not really set up for public safety missions. We're in the final research phases for a public safety drone, which would be applicable for public safety missions as well as any other department within the city. Next week on October 5th at 1 o'clock, we have a demo for the unit that I'm proposing that we purchase. So I invite everyone here to come out on Wednesday and get a chance to fly it if you'd like to. Training update, the Central Court Training Division had their meeting with the city administrators and city managers. The annual training program and plan that we put in place last year is bearing great fruit. Training hours are up, particularly in the technical rescue disciplines and also in fire suppression and live fire training. We continue to move forward and adjust that plan on an as-needed basis. To wit, if we see a particular type of trend in data analysis with alarm types, and that is a training issue, we can modify that plan and address that at that time. So we call that just-in-time training. It seems to be working out very well. Finally, Saturday, October 1st from 11 to 1 is the return of our annual open house. We're fire safety, some demonstrations, obviously static equipment display, to see all of our smiling faces and get some pretty nice refreshments as well. So open invitation for you to stop by and chat with us. That is the report. Ready to field any questions you may have.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I just have a general one, Ed. I guess as you heard, we selected a master developer that we want to create a redevelopment plan for that Manchester Road corridor. This master developer seems to be the one that's going to stick around for a long time and develop some of the apartment buildings in that whole area down there if we work out this agreement. Do you see an advantage to having a one company community down there running a lot of those apartments as far as dealing with our fire marshal and setting up a program for addressing any type of concerns in the apartment buildings or that area down there, as opposed to generic, many little owners kind of developing over time?
So the master development concept is good for us because then we're dealing with one company or one person and one concept of building. Regardless of what that is, it still has to meet the fire codes that the city has adopted. So from a safety aspect, it really doesn't matter who builds down there because they're all going to be building to the same standard. Who resides in those facilities and what those facilities occupy, essentially what they're zoned for, that's where we start to have some more in-depth conversations because that may change the risk profile of the structure. The way we're set up right now, we're comfortable with the current single fire marshal dedicated within our department, and then our ability to analyze, extract, and drill down and research on data. Right now, we're in a good spot. In 5 to 10 years, once we start seeing that development build out and we get the socioeconomic class, how much money, types of business, then we'll start analyzing that data, and we're really looking for trends. If we see a bunch of ambulance calls down there, we may talk about, hey, do we need to have something closer, or what can we do to prevent these calls before they even happen? If it's an education piece, we can do that. But the way we're set up right now, it really doesn't matter which developer it is because they'll still be building to the codes that are within the city of Brentwood and St. Louis County.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions?
Comment about the open house Saturday.
Yes.
The Parks Department is having this large garage sale throughout cities. It may be too late to get on the map or not, but it starts at 7, goes to 11 or 12. You might get some traffic as people go through. If you could get on the map, talk to Eric and see if there could be a handout or something, and see if you
Potentially,
could
I
get some local
believe
support.
our truck put up the sign on Brentwood Boulevard in front of Walgreens today, so that is like a billboard. So
Okay.
we're expecting a lot of foot traffic for 2 reasons. We haven't had this in a couple of years because of COVID, and it's going to be a beautiful day.
And the library has a following that will be there too.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's good too.
Yeah, so with a dual event, yes, we're expecting a lot of people, and I say, come one, come all.
Okay. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dan, Public Works?
What about,
Oh, Police Department.
Oh, I thought Public Works was next. I've got Public Works is next.
Oh,
Okay, sorry.
my schedule isn't, but that's okay.
My eyesight's bad, but I thought I got it right.
I just have a few quick updates, just rolling through them in no particular order, but the York Village streetlights, that project's done with the exception of over at 9 Middlesex. We do need to go back and trim that tree. It actually will be Davy tree because, we can only trim so much from the ground. So they'll have to bring a bucket truck and do that work. Whenever the tree's dormant, we've spoken with arborists and you can't do it now because it's still, has leaves on it.
Sometime November, December?
That's my understanding, yes, before the end of the year. And he said it would probably help once those are trimmed because the sun's lower in the fall, so it'll help hit that collector more directly than it is now. But the other trees, I've gone out there twice now at night and I've seen that they work.
The other ones work great.
Yeah, the Middlesex one, I know it's on because you can barely see it, but it doesn't have enough solar energy stored to really make it kick on and do anything significant.
Oh, the one that we're talking about that has the tree over it.
Yes.
You can, oh, there is a
Yeah, I stood there at night and just watched, and you can barely see it glowing, like the little LEDs are just barely dim.
okay.
So it does work, it just doesn't have enough to really kick that ballast on.
Because the other two, the one at Northcote and the one at Middlesex and York, the other southern, I've gotten 3 or 4 emails. Everybody thinks it's great. They put off plenty of light, and they've been good. So.
Yeah, and the York Hills ones I know are still working too, I saw
Oh,
those.
absolutely. Yep.
And there are still 2 at the shop for anybody that would want to sponsor them. They're sitting there ripe for the asking if somebody wants to do it. Switching over to Manchester Road, everyone I'm sure is aware that the Black Creek Bridge is open again, so there's more traffic on Manchester. I did have somebody call me today, so I reached out to the county because they're saying that the signalization is maybe lets like 2 or 3 cars through if you're going westbound Manchester to southbound Brentwood, which I haven't done, but they just said it seems like the signals are off. I know we don't actually control it, it's the county. So hopefully they take care of that. If not, I'll mention it when we have our Monday coordination meeting. And then Brentwood Boulevard at Strassner, we had brought that up before at 2010 South Brentwood. That's the one with the sewer lateral leak. MSD went out there, you know, of course they did their camera work, we did our camera work. Best we can tell, that's connected to a pipe that was abandoned, so that's why it fills up with sewage and then it leaks out and it pools down at that lower elevation. So they're supposed to coordinate with the county, dig Brentwood Boulevard, tie it on to the existing pipe that it should be on, and then cap the one that it is on that it shouldn't be on. So we don't know exactly when they're doing that, but it should be soon. They wanted to get it done before winter weather, and that'll be here before we know it. And then the Public Works building fence, that was the one that got blown over several months ago due to the wind damage. And that's all fixed across the front. You know, privacy slats are back, so everything's good with it. And then Strassner Drive, I'll have to call Meyer again. I called last week. The materials weren't in yet, but we plan on doing both those lights. You know, one was hit months ago and the other was just maybe a little over a month and a half ago. So we'll get both those lights set and wires pulled. And that's it.
Any questions?
No.
All
Thank you,
right.
Dan.
Thanks.
Police? Chief?
Good evening. Go through the crime report. Actually, this will be a pretty quick report. The good news is our crime for the last 30 days or so has been down. In particular, our car crime has been down. We've only had 5 incidents of car-related crime. Unfortunately, one was a lady who was carjacked in the, get the date on the carjacking event. I think it was on Wednesday, yeah. At any rate, the lady was carjacked by 2 guys armed with guns. Yes, it was on the 22nd. And since that time, the detectives have been tracking the car. It has not been recovered, but it's hit on 12 different cameras in North St. Louis since that time. So the car's still out there running around. We're hoping we recover it so that we can get some forensic evidence out of the vehicle. There were 2 groups of people doing car-related crime. They affected Brentwood on a couple of occasions. 2 of them were on Sundays. Those guys have been taken into custody, and I think that's a direct correlation on why our car crime went down pretty quickly. We continue to look at being part of a task force that's Central County driven. So we'll, as we get this task force up and running, we'll let you know exactly how many officers involved in it, what their mission is. It's really being copied off of the St. Charles County area task force, which has been very successful over the last year or so. At this point, it's just in its beginning stages. We continue to look at a 501(c) with a group of citizens that have volunteered to reform that group. That will be the Brentwood Police Foundation eventually, I think is going to be the title of it. The first thing that they're going to be looking at is a canine program and the costs and expenses behind that canine program. If that gets up and running, then we'll obviously be looking at that for the Brentwood bound area as well, and then applicable to other things as they come up through the city and even in other jurisdictions. Wanted to mention that we lost our speed trailer, so if you have citizens that are asking for our speed trailer, we do not have it anymore. It was old anyway, it was elderly, did not survive the floodwaters that hit it. We did claim it on our insurance, so hopefully we'll be able to replace it when the insurance comes through. We continue to do our bike and foot patrols that we mentioned to you last month. They started in the beginning of September. We have broken the city down into 10 quadrants. Angie Hawkins is coordinating, having our officers on bike patrols, and then they get off and walk foot beats. So far it's been really kind of a cool program. We've been watching the body cameras from the encounters with our citizens, and it's been very positive so far. So, and we're tracking the visits. We've got all of the neighborhoods broken down into sectors. So we'll be running that, and it's really predicated on weather as well. Obviously, if it's raining or really cold, we're not going to do it. But as the weather is beautiful now, it's really been successful so far. So we have a hiring process that we're getting ready to kick off. We have one person identified from the last process who we like for Nick Lang's spot. When that happens, hopefully it'll get done. But the lawyers are still kind of working their way through the contracts. I think it's close. I think Nick will be reporting probably sometime mid-October, hopefully. So when that happens, we'll be onboarding this new officer, and we'll give you an update and introduce him to the board when he's here. During the course of September so far, we've had 7 felony fleeing events. A lot of those were generated from our flock hits. The flock cameras continue to be a real benefit to us in terms of early notification. The flock camera on McKnight going northbound went up and is now operational. It went up about 2 weeks ago. So that should help us in our neighborhoods along McKnight. Right now we have 5 city cameras that the city's paying for that are functional. We have 2 that are in key areas that we're waiting for, one on Brentwood at Highway 64 and Hanley and Music Memorial. Neither one of those are up and running because St. Louis County had us back off until they get them up and on their poles and do the things the county has to do. National Night Out is on October 4th. We put out some stuff through Janet and social media. We do have one party on Stratford that the police department will be going by that night. So far, that's the only people that have applied for a permit, though, at this point. That was all I had. If anyone had any questions, we have to answer them.
Questions?
I have a question. It might be Bola, too. Financially, is there a budget problem with hiring someone to replace Nick if he's not going to leave till mid-October? Does he have to actually physically leave before the hiring process starts? Or can there be an overlap so somebody can step right in?
Our intention, I think, Bola, she and I talked about this, Nick's got to go, and then we would onboard the new officer. So when
there'll
Nick
be a
is
gap,
assigned,
no matter what.
might be a small gap, yeah. But we're done with the hiring process for this guy, and at this point, we would make a
I think the
recommendation.
person's ready to start. We
Yes,
just
ma'am.
need Nick to,
So it's going to be real close on the timing. We just got to get the lawyers to sign off on Nick's contract, so they found some more red line stuff. Lawyers are like that.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Chief, at our ward meeting, we got some good compliments on the bike patrol and the
Okay.
guys getting off and talking to citizens, so.
So, sorry.
Hopefully the Manchester openings alleviate some of your traffic complaints in the neighborhoods as well. So
We had the same experience, so thank you for that. With regard to the Central County Task Force, what communities are involved in that?
right now, Town and Country, Baldwin, Manchester, us. St. Louis County's running it, so county, and it's in its infancy right now. But there is interest from a lot of the other Central County cities.
And so does the St. Louis County hierarchy coordinate that then?
Hopefully, that's the goal. Yeah, they are interested. I personally talked to their chief's office and the colonel that runs that their auto theft task force. They are very interested in doing it, so I think the county will take the lead on it.
So is there any assistance that elected officials, as a for instance, might provide at this stage?
I think the push to other mayors and other cities, maybe an awareness piece of it on exactly how invasive, if they don't know, I don't know how they don't know if they don't read the news and watch the news. There is some resistance, honestly, from some elected officials to have their officers involved in the task force because, I mean, it brings risk. It brings risk. It brings risk in pursuits. It brings risk in resisting arrests, potentially. So there is some reluctance on some elected officials' part because of that. So some push to them might be an advantage for us.
And with regard to elected officials and their opportunity to perhaps be of some influence, do you see any opportunity there also with the prosecutor's office in terms of their philosophy about this? I mean, we talked about this at length about how this has been viewed strictly as property crime, and now that it has come into the daylight hours and weekend hours, that it's no longer, that we're talking about confronting citizens and people having to deal with this kind of crime, not in the middle of the night, but the middle of the afternoon.
I would say that from an elected official's position at this point, pushing the other elected officials in other cities is more important. What we're seeing from the county prosecutor's office is positive at this point.
Good.
Mr. Bell's taken on an interest in this. He understands the issue. And he's actually assigned 2 prosecutors to address these crimes. So, and that's been push from us, from law enforcement to his office, and he's responded well so far.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
We have no consent agenda. We have an old business item, and I asked for this to be brought up. In 2019, we became part of an agreement with a number of other communities to manage the possible influx of scooters into our community. It had to do with how they were being distributed, how they were being picked up, and that kind of stuff. Given where we've come from that point until now in terms of hearing more and more about the number of accidents and injuries that are attributable to the scooters in general, to the decision by other communities to downright outlaw them altogether. I wanted to bring back up, at least for discussion, and see whether or not the board would be, or that this committee would be interested in recommending to the board that we remove ourselves from this agreement. We have to give, I think, 120 days notice, is that right?
That's correct.
And so I guess what I'm asking is if there is a motion from this committee to have the Board of Aldermen consider a resolution rescinding our participation in this agreement and giving proper notice to the organization. If somebody just wanted to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, and so it's open for discussion. I'll just say, I've been persuaded by a lot of the stuff I've read, a lot of the stuff I've seen, and stuff that I've seen personally, having to do with just the issues of litter, not litter, but these things being littered in various places, having them be used in areas where there's no intention for them to be used, having them be used in a pretty much unregulated way, and accidents and injuries that have come as a result. I'm in favor of having the board take this up with an idea that we would no longer be a part of that agreement. That's just my opinion, but.
I share that opinion.
I agree. The last couple of weeks, I've spent more time in the city itself than I have in a while, and I have noticed how many scooters are just disregarded, shoved here. No company is coming to pick them up and line them up neatly. They're just there. So I think our decision was a good one, and I would like to see us move on this.
Okay, so with that, if there's not any more discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote on the motion.
Okay. Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks for that. The new business we have tonight, there's 4 items. The first is Litzinger Bremerton safety concern. Bola, who's going to speak to that? Sorry.
So this was brought to our attention by Alderman Gould, and the concern expressed was about the safety of children going to McGrath and the ability to cross the street at those intersections closest to the school. So given the fact that one side of the street is Brentwood, the other is Rock Hill, he proposes a number of solutions, and Dan, are you not aware of this? And so it would require that the city talk to the city of Rock Hill to see whether they could duplicate the kind of signage that we would be able to put on our side of the road. Dan, take it from there.
Yeah, whenever I looked at this, I believe the concern is more Litzinger than it is Bremerton. So if you're going east and west on Litzinger past the school, if you're going westbound towards McKnight, I don't see it being as big a deal. And that is our property, so I don't know if police have seen issues with people running stop signs and accidents or things of that nature. I know on the north side of Litzinger, at that corner of Bremerton and Litzinger, you could put in a solar-powered stop sign, kind of like you recommended. On the south side, that one, it doesn't belong to us, and 2, I don't think it would work there because it's so close to that building. I think that's Holleran and Schwartz or something like that. I believe it's a lawyer's office, but it's like a 2-story gray building, brick building or block building. And I think that the sun would be obscured on the panel quite a bit. Me as an engineer, if you're trying to draw attention to the stop sign, if you're going eastbound heading towards Bremerton, I get why some people, if you're new to the area, you wouldn't see it because it's close to a building and there's an Ameren pole behind it that's, you know, much bigger than it and it's got a transformer on it, so maybe it kind of gets camouflaged a little bit. So what I thought they do sell would be a stop ahead warning sign. You know, it's a yellow diamond that flashes and it's got a picture of a stop sign with an arrow indicating that there's a stop ahead. You know, you can get them with text. I would just do the pictogram that way. You know, if you don't necessarily read or understand English, you know, you can see the stop sign symbol. But that would still require it to be on the Rock Hill side in advance of the stop sign. And those are roughly $1,500-$1,600 a piece. The other one I saw, like a high-vis one, like that we would buy for our side, I got a quote, they're like $2,000 with the solar panel, everything.
So is the recommendation that you're talking about here is to approach the city of Rock Hill about allowing us to place one that we would purchase?
I was gonna see if they would wanna put something on their side. If they don't, then that is an option, you know, if they don't either have the budget or don't agree to do it, you know, maybe we can ask that they consider us doing it.
I've kind of been in that intersection, especially when school gets out, and they usually got a bus parked there. They've got this poor custodian out there with a stop sign trying to get kids across the street. I think that whole intersection needs to be looked at as far as redoing the markings. I don't know if we can write stop like sometimes you see on the street itself before the stop sign. The other thing is there's no pedestrian, at that crosswalk, there's no pedestrian, you know, state law stop for pedestrians like we do have at Litzinger and high school. So I think just some overall improvements. We have no school zone markings along that side of the road, which I think's.
If we did, they could have been, you know, faded or, you know, covered over whenever that was redone back in 2015, 16. I'm not sure if it ever had it, to be honest. I know we have it around Mark Twain because we just repainted those. We've got the stencils that say school.
Yeah. So I don't know if, you know, if you could look from an engineering standpoint, a traffic engineer, at what we can do to improve that whole intersection. I know things are going to change. It's going to get busier, I guess, when Mark Twain starts going over there too. And there's still, hopefully by then they'll be queuing up elsewhere besides going down Sinclair. Because, you know, when that bus is there and people are stopped, people actually going into the other lane to go around the bus or to go around the stop sign, it's just a real mess. And I just was wondering if there's possible a way you could look at it and come up with more than just a sign idea for that whole intersection right there.
Yeah, the stencils tend to not work that well, especially if there's, you know, precipitation like snow or leaves or things of that nature. I would be more inclined to do the blinking stop sign, you know. Again, I got a quote on it. They actually make a better one now. Like the one over by York, it's just illuminated on the perimeter. The newer one, the $2,000 option one, actually the word stop is illuminated too. It's on a dusk to dawn sensor. So it'll flash the word stop and it still lights up around the perimeter. And they claim that those are visible, I believe, like over a quarter-mile away.
Well, whatever signage you could come up with, if you look at that intersection, I think it'd be a big improvement, so.
Yeah, the stop ahead, I thought, well, that probably would be on the Rock Hill side, and I could see that being necessary. You can't park on that south side, and it hardly has any shoulder anyhow.
All right.
But I think if you're driving over to your right because of the building, I think that stop sign kind of gets lost. And you could put a bigger one up. We have like some at the shop that are 36-inch square instead of just 24 square. Or actually 30. 30 is what you should be putting, and that's, I didn't have a tape with me. I couldn't guess if that was 24 or 30, but they do make a 36. But it would still be just a regular metal sign with the reflectorization, and I thought, well, the lights would actually bring more attention to it, especially if it's darker with the building blocking it.
Are you saying that I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
Are you saying that the location of that office building and the angle of the sun and all that makes it not practical to put?
Correct, because you would typically want the panel facing south, which would be towards the building. You can rotate them to some degree on the top, but I don't know if you'd catch enough sun to make it work right where the existing one is. But you could move one upstream of it that's a diamond that flashes stop ahead, so that if you saw that one, then your next reaction should be there's a real stop sign just beyond this point. You know, and that one could be in the sun, because there is tree lawn there.
I understand what you're saying, but I would go for overkill and do both on the street. I'm a big believer in the painting on the street in the lane, the interstates that tell you with the big design where you are, or stop ahead in the lane, I think is a good warning. And the days that it's covered up with snow are very few compared to the others. So if Rock Hill would be amenable to stop ahead on the street with whoever stencil it is.
Right.
And then go ahead and put the stop sign. I don't think we can do too much. I also don't think if there are zebra crossings there, do they need to be repainted and refreshened, or aren't they?
Yeah, I don't believe there's,
I'm not even sure there are.
yeah, the newer way to do things, you know, those are just bars that are there that I remember seeing. You know, the newer style to bring more attention are those Continental, which are the rectangular bars like you see at McKnight near Sonora, crossing over McKnight. You know, those you can get in thermoplastic, and you would just melt them, and there'd be big white blocks going across there. That might be another way to, you know, as those fade, just peel the old stuff up and put the bigger blocks.
Well, especially with kids involved. I know there is a crossing guard on High School, so you're saying a custodian is on Litzinger.
Litzinger and Bremerton, there is a crossing right there. That's what I'm
So
saying.
that helps.
I
but-
think
There
it'd
is.
it could be enhanced with signage and what.
The stop ahead would be
Okay.
better only because if there's already a bus parked there, if you put stop near the stop sign, you're not gonna see it because a bus is probably gonna block your view. But if you put it further upstream of the stop sign that would say stop ahead, you know, that would be, assuming that they're looking down at the pavement and not texting or whatever.
Well, and if there are several cars lined up, if it's on the pavement itself, as those cars move, it's pretty obvious. The more warning we can give people, the better.
So I'm hearing, I'm writing this down as I go. I'm hearing that three separate things here. The lit stop ahead signage, the pavement, on the pavement stencil stop ahead, and then the enhancement of the crosswalk itself. Is there anybody inclined to make a motion to direct staff to see if those three things can be accomplished with the cooperation of Rock Hill?
I'll make that motion. I'd like to add that investigate whether we need to put a school zone in there with signage.
Fine, yeah. Okay, well, so with that, is there a second?
I'll second it, and in point of discussion, can we approach the school board and see if the district might like to contribute to the cost of some of this?
How soon do you want this done?
Get going tomorrow.
We can do that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Very much. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Are you on this next one? No, the next one is the purchase of the fire engine. We had talked about this a little bit, and I appreciate the memo and all the information. It strikes the chair that perhaps this is more of a Ways and Means issue than it is a public safety issue. With that in mind, I'd entertain a motion that this item be transferred over to the Ways and Means Committee.
I'll happily make that motion.
Second it.
Is there any further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Sorry, because we got to go back to Public Works here just for a second. And then
That's
we'll come
fine.
back up and we'll deal with the critical illness trust. But Dan, can you come to the podium and talk to us about the data you collected along Lawn Avenue?
Yeah, there's several attachments, but I don't expect everybody to go through them since I know the one's just raw data, and it's several hundred pages in length, the PDF. So what I tried to do is like summarize everything in the memo. So we ran the data collectors on lawn, the block between Brentwood Boulevard and High School. And then if you look at some of the synopsis, the 85th percentile speed's 30 miles per hour. So basically 85% of the cars are doing around 30 miles per hour or less, and then you've got that 15% that's actually going greater. 50th percentile speed's 26 miles per hour. The average speed's 25.3. The vehicle count, so over a 14-day period, there's only about 6,500 vehicles, so that's pretty low. Because if you look at the ADT, which is that average daily traffic, that count was fairly low. It's in the 400s. During Monday through Friday, like 462, Saturday, Sunday, like 460, something or other, 464. So that's really not a lot of traffic, volume-wise. What we saw, like over on Pine, where there are speed cushions, their volume's closer to 1,000 vehicles a day. Rosalie, same thing, about 1,000. So the volume's pretty low. However, that being a longer block, whenever you look at those 5 mile per hour bins that I had them sorted into, I see where the overall number of vehicles based on the roughly 460 a day, that fraction's pretty high. It's 100 or so vehicles a day are going 30 miles per hour or greater.
Right.
When you look at the overall number.
Right.
So that translates to the little pie chart, so I kind of color-coded that to show you those bins just like graphically. Most people, I would say, are doing, 25, 29, that's a pretty decent sized wedge, but then the green pie, that's a decent size as well. And then whenever you actually look again back at that table, like I said, you've got 1,082 cars in the 30 to 34 mile per hour range, 142 vehicles in the 35, 39, only 14 in the 40 to 44, which is moving along. And then a couple outliers, you have 2 of them that did 45 to 49, one of them between 50 and 54, and then one of them extra crazy at 55 to 59. Because the high speed that was recorded was 56 miles per hour, I believe. Yeah, 56 on a Saturday, July 9th at time 15:05, military time. So that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And I did go through the data, and I think the other committee members did as well. Are there any questions that you have about the data?
Just a comment. I'd like to see more forced compliance by the police rather than a speed bump. To me, this is an issue like there's been one shoe bomber, so now everybody in the United States takes off our shoes at airports. here we have one outlier, so we immediately need to go to speed cushions. I think I'm not sure this is warranted on this, so.
So with that in mind, did you have any
No,
comment?
I agree.
Is there any, I would entertain a motion to direct staff to place speed cushions on lawn as determined by staff, consistent with their memo and recommendation here, if there's a motion to be made about it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Ed, sorry. Item D, under new business, the Missouri Firefighter Critical Illness Trust and Pool.
Very good. Appreciate, again, the time to discuss this very important enhancement to firefighter safety. As a cancer survivor myself, this particular program is beneficial for our industry. It's a well-known fact that our business is dangerous and we're exposed to some nasty stuff. Even with full protective measures, there's still some stuff that gets through. So the purpose of our discussion here today is to evaluate the City of Brentwood and Brentwood Fire Department to join the Missouri Critical Illness Pool. I've brought some guest speakers with me today, Fire Chief from Eureka, Greg Brown, and then also the attorney within the trust plan, Mr. Carl Scarborough. I'll offer them up as subject matter experts to discuss the details of the program itself, which is outlined in the handout at your positions. Essentially what this does, it allows us to participate in a pool that provides protection, essentially another insurance plan for known cancers to our industry, over and above what we would get for workman's compensation. It's based off of the number of people that participate, and there are 3 different levels that we could. So the cost is essentially predicated on the level of participation you choose and the number of employees that participate. There are some financial benefits with this as well that Chief Brown and Mr. Scarborough will speak to. But essentially the information that outlines this program is in the recommendation memo at your positions. If you don't have any other questions, generally fire department related, I'd like to turn the floor over to our subject matter experts. We also have 2 other folks that are going to be joining us on Zoom from the Kansas City area that are also our subject matter experts for the program.
Okay, we welcome them. Are there, before we let you go from the podium, are there questions from the committee? So I have a question about what you just said. So I saw the memorandum, and I also saw the questions that were raised by our city attorney. Knowing the number of firefighters we have, and the number of firefighters we would want to include in this pool, can you tell me in 2023 what the cost will be for I guess a level of benefit to $300,000?
Yes, so it's based off the number of employees. So right now we are at 22 of 23 authorized staff. We have firefighter James Tesson, who is anticipated to be retiring this week under the pension committee. So he is going to be a medical disability. We have an individual that we're going to make a qualified offer once his position becomes available. That'll bring us up to 23. So depending on the level of participation, the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 level, it'll be that amount times 23 persons.
So, but the question raised by the city attorney said that using the calculator that he saw, the annual contribution would vary by as much as 200-300%, from $1,000 to $3,600 on an annual basis.
Yeah, I believe our plan was to go to the $300,000 level right out of the box. So the cost for that multiplied by the 23 employees.
But
Okay,
not
and-
all 23 are eligible, right? They have to have at least had 5 years in the fire
Yeah,
service?
correct.
So it's a lesser number that we've modeled into the 2023 proposed budget.
Based on the seniority of our firefighters.
Right, based on their tenure
Their
in the
tenure.
fire service. So I think that budgeted cost is probably less than $3,000.
But will
Dollars for
obviously
23.
change as
Yes.
they get older,
Yes.
obviously. Okay.
Yes.
The other comment you made was that this would be a benefit over and above workers' compensation. Is that ultimately, is that so? I mean, there is not there's not an ability by so when an employer contributes to a benefit plan, which is what this is, I mean, the employer's paying the benefit, not the individual firefighters. As I understand the workers' compensation law, they would accumulate a credit under the law for benefits paid under that employer-sponsored program. So there's a payout from this pool. The workers' compensation carrier hired by Brentwood or by Slate could then be eligible to claim against the money they're paying out in workers' compensation, the money that would be paid by this pool. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're not wrong in saying that, and I would defer the technical explanation to the members here who participated in writing the document.
Well, I guess, okay, and that would be fine. I just want to make sure that as we talk about this and as we consider it, we are talking about a situation where it is not purely an additional benefit over and above what might be available under workers' compensation. And in a number of circumstances, I can see where the money being paid by this pool would be offset by a claim for credit made by the workers' compensation carrier at some point. So anyway, let's.
Yes, I'll defer to the subject
Okay,
matter
all
experts
right.
for sure. Chief and Carl, please.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for allowing us to come here and talk. As Ed said, my name is Greg Brown. I'm the fire chief in the Eureka Fire District. I'm also the chairman of the Critical Illness Pool. We've got with us our attorney, Carl Scarborough. He's also the one who wrote the document for in particular the questions that you brought up, and these are questions that we've talked about before. Also on the Zoom, our plan administrator, Joe DePape, and Jennifer Alvarado with McGriffin Associates. So I think they can hear us now. We talked to them, and they're also here to answer some questions. In starting, kind of the overview of the program that we're setting up is there's been an issue, a significant increase over the last 25, 30 years of firefighter cancer. And the research shows, and it goes back to the products of combustions that are produced in fires nowadays. They've changed significantly over the past 50 years. Some 300 times the amount of carcinogens are put off, and it's the materials that are used, that we use as a society to build things. You know, there's more petroleum-based products and petroleum parts that go into manufacturing what's going on. So that's a big significant part of why we're seeing more carcinogens in the smoke that our people are exposed to, and the related increases in cancer. There's been a lot of research done by a number of entities across this country as to these types of cancer and how they correlate to the smoke. And we've, in our program, put 17 types of cancer. It originally started with 14. Because of some of the research and data that's come out, we've added 3 additional since we started to that number. This whole process started about 10 years ago when we went to the legislature asking for presumptive cancer legislation in the work comp area, because what is happening, what has happened, is because it's a chronic exposure. The documentation wasn't always what could directly point back to a specific instance, and inevitably these were going to court. You're an attorney, you do work comp work, you can say it a lot better than I can. But anyhow, these claims to be filed, these firefighters have cancer after, however many years of service, many chronic exposures, potentially acute exposures, they were showing up. And the research goes back and shows that it's the products of combustion. But when we were going to court, the firefighters were going to court, most of the time they weren't getting an award. There has been, to my knowledge, one case in the state of Missouri where a firefighter was, it was determined that it was a work-related injury, that he got cancer. It's a Gladstone decision. I don't consider that a win for the fire service because the award was done after, or the verdict was delivered after he'd been dead 4 years, I believe. That's not a win. So what we went for is we went to the legislature, and for about 7 years, we were turned back. We couldn't make any progress with the legislature on what we were asking for. So we, as the fire service, the firefighters union, the chiefs associations, and we actually reached out and were working with the insurance industry, the work comp industry at the time, and said, let's look and see what's going on other places in the country. There's some 36 states that have presumptive laws. Let's see what's happening elsewhere. We went to Colorado, and they had a program very similar in what we based our program off of. They had presumptive cancer in the law, but it was rebuttable, so they were still going to court. They were still going through the process.
So how do you compare that? Let me interrupt you if I don't mind.
Sure.
How do you compare that to the line of duty legislation that just passed in the Missouri legislature? That's workers' compensation enhanced benefit with presumptive causation.
Well, the line of duty legislation that was passed, are you talking about for the line of duty death?
For workers' compensation, right. They identified a number of different illnesses that would qualify an employee in particular lines of duty, first responders being one of them, that they would be entitled to an enhanced benefit and entitled to a presumption in the evidence as to medical causation with regard to a number of different conditions, mesothelioma, a number of lung-related conditions having to do with different known carcinogens, things like that.
Well, again,
The list isn't 17, but I think it's 5 or 6.
It's 5 or 6 if I remember correct, and I'm not as familiar with that program as this program. What we're doing with this program is we're trying to timely pay, where, as you know, going through the worker comp system takes a long time, usually, to get through it. Our goal is once we have a confirmed diagnosis, within 10 days that we start paying to help the individual stay whole as long as possible. Because what we're seeing is the firefighters are, obviously dealing with cancer, worried about keeping their job, worrying about, will I get to go back to work? What am I gonna do for my family? And potentially dealing with the legal system, trying to get through all that. What our goal is we try to keep them whole as long as possible, try to cover their bills. Their normal health insurance will still treat them as they're getting treated now. This will be for out-of-pocket expenses, extraordinary expenses, and it's based off a simple matrix. Depending on the type of cancer you got and the stage of cancer you got, there's an amount that you get paid.
Are the benefits taxable?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
They're not?
I was just making sure.
All right. And our city attorney came up with a couple of other questions. I'll run through them. One had to do with the contribution by member agencies to the reserves of the trust. How long has the trust been in existence?
Trust has been in existence officially this year. The steering committee began its work last year after the enabling legislation went into effect in August of 2021. There's already a healthy reserve based upon a grant that was provided through the Division of Fire Safety of $5 million. And so there is more than ample reserve at this point based upon the membership. Any agencies that are joining at this point, no one is being asked to upfront any reserve money. Generally speaking, once the system's been up and running for more than a year, There'll be sort of an open enrollment time, and everyone will come in on January 1. Right now, of course, we're in a situation where we're taking members as they come. So we look at what their contribution would be and prorate it for the current year and allow them to join in at any point. But again, there's no reserve capital, reserve or additional monies being requested by any of the agencies that are joining at this point.
The trust allows for it in the instance that the reserves need to be replenished, but that's not something you anticipate, obviously, with a brand new.
That's correct, and the money that was provided through the Division of Fire Safety through that grant was a big bonus, in terms of getting the system set up and running. I will tell you that some of that language, as it relates to the ability to assess additional monies and provide additional assessments throughout the year. The trust itself is governed in its formation, and then on an ongoing basis, it was governed both by the Secretary of State and the Division of Commerce and Insurance. And so it was required language that had to be put in there that in the instance of need, the trustees would be able to request that additional money to keep the trust solvent. And so that's the reason for that language in there.
Okay.
That $5 million. So, the actuary told us we needed to put about $3 million into reserves to capitalize the reserves.
Mhm.
And that was based on 5,000 plan participants. The additional money that's there, 1.5 million of that is going to discount the rates for the first 3 years. As you can see in the handout that we gave you what those rates are based on the level of participation. $500,000 that's designated for education and prevention measures.
So as your number of members in the trust go up, the reserves are going to go up on a percentage basis, I would imagine.
Eventually, we'll get there. Again, that was based on a $5,000 member pool.
Right.
Right now, we're at 1,200 members. That's based off 28 departments or 28 agencies. We've got about 23 agencies that are somewhere in the process that we're working with.
How many agencies in Missouri are there that are eligible to join this?
There's 819 fire departments or fire agencies in the state of Missouri.
Okay. So the last question I had from this was, it says that there's a process for withdrawing, and it's a number of days, and you have to make your notice. But then it also says that if any member of our department who is receiving benefits or has received benefits, we may be required to continue to make contributions for as long as that member receives benefits. The tail contribution obligation may also be something worth exploring. This is the city attorney talking now, so that we have an answer to that situation if the board should inquire. So that your obligation to continue paying into the trust would extend as long as the payout?
So I think I can clarify that. I think it's a language clarification issue is what I think that it is. If you'll look in the section up above that, it also addresses an involuntary removal of an agency, and there's very similar language up there. It's a belt and suspenders approach to it, to basically state that, if you get booted out involuntarily, but you still have someone receiving benefits, you can't just bail out and not pay. And it's the same approach down below, which is to say that if you are current and have maintained a current payment, then at that point the benefits will continue, but you must have made your required contributions. I don't think it was intended to be a tail. What I believe is that it had to have been current for the current year, because that's where the provision of the benefit comes from, and it wouldn't create what I think we're talking about, which is an ongoing obligation. I'm happy to clarify that and provide a written response back.
So did I hear you say that at some point you were talking about the capitalization and the reserves and the anticipation of it, going up, and that the additional money, the $3 million, would be set aside in certain ways? But it also struck me that you indicated that's one of the reasons why they're able to offer rates at the price they're at. Is that an introductory rate? Are we talking about the fact that we can expect it in year
First
3 or 4?
We discounted the rate, but if you take the you were discussing earlier, the firefighter, career firefighter at the $300,000 rate. Our fully burdened rate, according to our actuary, is just above $300 right now. So you can see the $114 first year.
And that's based on 5,000 participants?
That was based on 5,000 participants.
So if that number gets higher, I mean, you're at 1,200 now, but if that number gets higher than 5,000, then those rates are likely to go up, I would imagine.
No, if it goes higher, you're spreading the risk out, so the rates are actually,
Yeah, but you're covering more people though, aren't you?
but economy to scale with it, and I don't know if Joe can hear me. He's our trader and our insurance guy. Maybe he can explain. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Or Jennifer, go ahead.
Joe, are you unmuted? You're absolutely right, Chief Brown. It's the law of large numbers. The spread of risk means that it can be absorbed by more entities, more bodies. So the rates would go down.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, this whole concept is new. I haven't seen anything like it, and I'm a little bit confused on exactly how it works. You're saying it does not replace workers' comp. So let's assume that a firefighter is diagnosed. This kicks in. Is payment made directly to him or to the hospital bills and medical bills?
Directly to the individual.
And then if workman's comp applies, I don't quite understand what you said about what happens. He's had money to pay some of those benefits, so what happens now?
So I'm not going to attempt to pass myself off as a workers' comp expert because that's not what I do. But the intent here would be that the monies from the pool that would be paid out, if in fact we're talking about an active work comp case, would then be paid out for items that perhaps weren't covered by work comp. Work comp pays out a portion of a salary based upon a particular rate that's calculated for someone who's off with a temporary total disability. The types of coverage are controlled by the employer to a degree. Obviously, everyone tries to look out for their employees the best that they can, but there's a degree of control that's exercised there. If we're talking about experimental treatments or things like that an employee might want to explore, workers' comp may not be willing to foot the bill for that, but they may have no objection to it. That's the place where then the pool could step into that kind of instance and get into the treatment payment side, even when work comp is then involved. As far as the long-term goes, the question of the offset, will it offset at the end? There is language in the enabling statute, 320-400 in Missouri statutes that enables for an offset. How that's going to work exactly, we've not had it happen. And so I can't tell you exactly how it's going to work and how it will interplay with the new statute that the chairman was talking about. I also couldn't tell you because one of the biggest hurdles to this point, and the reason that this particular enabling language and statutory language was put together the way that it was because of the high bar to proving a work comp cancer claim for a firefighter. So there may have to be adjustments that are made based upon any changes to the work comp statutes, but that's something, again, we've not seen that interplay yet. And so I don't have a definitive answer for you on that.
So then I guess the last question is, how long?
Can you hear me? This is Joe DePay.
Yeah.
Yes, Joe.
Yeah. My technology's not working very well, so Jennifer's trying to patch me in on her connection. But I guess what I would add to this conversation is that the problem is that under workers' compensation, not having any kind of a presumption statute, whether it be rebuttable or non-rebuttable, 90% of all cancer claims are going to end up getting denied or litigated for 6 months, 2 years, or 4 years. Even in Colorado, with the presumption of cancer, the rebuttable presumption of cancer, we had firefighters dying before they would be issued benefits under workers' compensation. So clearly, with Missouri not having any workers' comp presumption, it's the burden of proof is on the firefighter to prove that the carcinogen that caused the cancer was a carcinogen in the workplace, and that specific employee, they've got to be able to identify the points in time that they were subject to it. So it's a very laborious, very intense, a lot of information, call logs from the fire department, chemicals that were involved, and this information isn't kept. So it's very hard for a firefighter to prove. On the employer side, what they look at is lifestyle, other jobs, hereditary factors, and it's a very invasive investigation that the employee has to go through in order for the employer to look at whether this was more likely caused from workplace or from outside the workplace actions. Both sides have to hire professional or expert witnesses. It gets expensive, and it goes on for years. What our program does is just based on the diagnosis. We don't care about cause. It's just based on the diagnosis. One of the covered cancers, we start paying it within 10 days, and we pay $8,000 a month until the limit is paid out. So that cash flows it out a little bit, which gives us a little bit of protection for being hit by an anomalous amount of full limits losses in 1 year. Now, we use CDC, Center for Disease Control, information on cancer to determine the frequency, the severity, how many people are going to get cancer in the general population. And then we go to firefighter-specific tests that have been done over the last 30 years on, hundreds of thousands of firefighters, or at least 100,000 firefighters, to determine what the severity and the morbidity rate is on firefighters. So we have good data to pinpoint how many people are going to get it, what severity levels they're going to get in relation to the general population. That's what allows us to put this information together. So we're comfortable with our numbers. We've done this program in Colorado for 5 years, and it's been very successful. The firefighters love it, and they're willing to give up, and they have given up their presumption of cancer legislation in lieu of payments under our program. Basically, our program provides coverage to 90% of the firefighters that file with the diagnosis, as opposed to previously only 33% would get paid, and sometimes it would take them 2 years or longer in order to go through the adjudication system for this. The funding on this, the $5 million that was given to us by the legislature, and the way the system is cash flowed, is going to give us time to react to it. We have budgeted the $1.5 million out for 3 years and incremented, and the trustees structured it that way because they wanted to entice as many people up front to join while the subsidies are there. Currently, we're running way less than 50% of what we anticipated, which what that means is that the subsidies are just going to probably extend longer. 50% is our first year, and we're already almost through that, and we have less than a third of the people we had anticipated. Of course, we anticipated getting going earlier on, but so that's just going to increase the subsidy, more money held in surplus until we do actually spend those subsidies.
Okay, so the question I was intending to
can't remember
ask
what it
is
was, but-
about terminating the program. That you have a lot of information here on how an individual would become part of the program. Assuming that the person becomes healthy again, at what point is there someone who is monitoring this to say there's a cutoff?
Yeah, so we pay based on diagnosis, without any monitoring of recovery. If they have the diagnosis, this is an accident policy. If they have the diagnosis, we make the payment. We spread it out over the term, but there is since it is an accident policy, it's just a cash award. Once the diagnosis is made, they get the money. It can go for treatment. It can go for whatever they want it to. It's just a cash award. So there would be no monitoring of their condition. If they are able to get well within, 30, 60, 90 days and return to work, then it's a win-win for everybody. There's no reason for them to malinger and, pretend like they're bad, because they got their cash award. They can return to work and, continue working. So I think that's what works best about it.
So it's not ending on when they return to work, they've been given a lump sum and they go back to work as soon as possible, whatever the lump sum remains is.
Yeah, they're not, it's not a lump sum, it comes out in payments, but that amount, based on that chart, it's a sum,
Yes.
that's what they're gonna get. Another part that's important to make sure you guys know about our program, we're also trying to change the culture within the fire service. And part of that is from prevention and education. Prevention and education, like there's 11 things that the department has to attest to that we're gonna do as part of our organization. We're gonna do gross decontamination on the scene, technical decontamination when we get back to the station. Individuals exposed are gonna shower, the clothes they had on are gonna get washed at the firehouse because we don't want them spreading potential carcinogens onward. In the overhaul phase of fire operations, right now, typically most departments, and once the carbon monoxide level drops, then you can take your mask off. No, the carcinogens are still there. You take it to the end until you're deconned off. So there's certain things that we're trying to do to protect and prevent. If you're gonna be part of this program, if you're gonna have this coverage, you've gotta do these other things as an agency to help protect yourself. We've also partnered with a group called Detect Together, which is out of Massachusetts. We have training that is all part of our website that's monitored to make sure everybody's going through on early detection methods. Because plain and simple, if you detect the cancer early and get it treated early, the odds of the individual coming back are much higher and the cost is much lower. I'll give you an example real quickly. Take lung cancer for an example. If it's found in early stages, which is typically a 2 to 4 millimeter tumor, the availability of that individual, the probability of that individual coming back to work is very high. Their mortality, their survivability rate is at 92%. Almost 100% of those, barring other comorbidities, will be able to come back to work. You find it late stage, stage 3, stage 4 of cancer, and the outcome's much less. The mortality rate is 7%. The chance of them coming back to work is 0. Catching it early stage, the cost of treatment is estimated $30,000 to $35,000 to get them healthy, bring them back to work, have a long and healthy career, hopefully, versus find it late. The cost of treatment's going to be $250,000 to $500,000, and we're basically paying that money to probably watch them die. So we want to change the culture, make sure our guys are doing the right thing to protect and prevent them. Again, you're required as an agency to say, we're going to do this. Here's the steps we're going to follow. We want to change that culture. We want to do those early detection things so early treatment comes in. Some of the other things we share that aren't required, there's other tests that are out there that can be part of an annual physical or a biannual physical, whatever your agency decides to or has implemented. There's blood testing that can actually find markers in the blood for different types of cancer extremely early. And, you know, again, we try to provide that information, get it out to individuals. Again, it's about keeping our people healthy. If they do have the exposure, they do contract the disease, that we catch it early, get them treated early, and get them back to work. And then, you know, in the long term, you know, let them have a long and healthy career, and then, you know, making sure that their pension takes care of them for a long and healthy retirement, hopefully. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
On the 5-year eligibility, you got to be a full-time, I guess, is that a full-time firefighter or a full-time at the department?
No, it's being a firefighter, and it also counts volunteer time. If you look in our dues chart, it shows, you know, for fire, there's a different rate for a volunteer firefighter versus a career firefighter because of the amount of exposure potential. But no, it's 5 years with any department.
Okay, so if somebody
Qualifies
comes
them.
from a department that may be a smaller department that may not be following these 9 precautions, and then comes to us and we're participating in your program, they're automatically in the program if we're paying
You
them.
enroll them, and they're covered, yes.
So there's not any look back at a pre-existing.
No, there is the stipulation in there, as you see from, I'm sure it's in the packets that you got handed out, that they have a baseline physical within, I think it's 16 months prior to starting the program, but that's it.
And then the trust itself, who is on the board, or how is that?
In the
organized?
packet I handed out to you, it's members of the program that are on the board. Myself, I'm the chair. Corey Hogan's the vice chair. Chief Kirk Lair, who is out of Central Jackson County, he's the treasurer. The other members, there's fire chiefs on there. Dr. Sarah Janke, who is one of the leading researchers in not only firefighter cancer, but first responder health issues. She's out of the Kansas City area, her group, and it's in the handout. Let me look. Center for Fire Rescue EMS Health Research, and Dr. Janke is one of the leaders around the country in researching what's going on. Her and her team up in Kansas City. Talking about Dr. Janke, one of the things I told you that out of the $5 million, there's $500,000 that we've earmarked for training and preventative measures. There was a class that was put on by the National Firefighter Cancer Alliance that was held in Kansas City several months ago. Dr. Janke's group brought them in. It has researchers, it has fire service professionals, what's being done within the industry. It also has victims talking. We also have other people like Heather Markle, who's with the Detect Together group. She is part of that. That was such a good program. Our board has decided we're going to bring that program back to Missouri 3 times. One in the St. Louis area, probably one in the Columbia, Jeff City area, and once in Southwest Missouri. Again, trying to get the message out. I sat through the day up there, and I can tell you, if you sit through that day, and we want to get as many people as we can there, you sit through that day, and you're going to want to be doing the things to protect yourself, your fellow firefighters, and your department.
Is there like some type of financial reporting to some state agency as to, on an annual basis, as to your reserves and how is that reported?
So there'll be an annual accounting through Division of Commerce and Insurance. DCI has oversight, and so any changes that occur as it relates to the trust and the bylaws of the trust will have to be cleared with them. So changes that we make in that particular regard, but there are essentially our agency that we report to. The Secretary of State we had to report to as been our initial startup. Simply because we had to file the articles of incorporation as it related to a not-for-profit. So we had 3 different sets of rules we had to play by, and it got pretty interesting there for a while. But yes, we do have an ongoing oversight from the state.
And has any other departments signed up yet?
Yes, we've got, I believe the number's 28 agencies across the state. We've got about 23 that are somewhere in the process that we're working with. Currently, we're covering about 1,200 firefighters. I can tell you the Eureka Fire District is a member of Fallon Fire District, Wentzville Fire District, City of Hazelwood, City of Lee Summit, City of Liberty, Mid-County Fire Protection down by the Lake of the Ozarks. Like I said, I think the number's 28. I don't got them all memorized. But yeah, we're moving along with it. We started coverage May the 1st. On our first firefighters, and like I said, we're at 1,200 right now, and we think that's going to continue to grow.
Have you had any claims?
Yes, sir. We do have one claim that we have assigned a dollar amount to. Again, based on that chart, that dollar amount is $75,000. We've had another claim that we're waiting for more information to come in from the doctors to make sure it's covered. We had one that was put in by an agency that was not a covered cancer, so that one was denied.
If you don't, so according to, I think it was Joe or somebody else, I don't know who exactly, but the idea that we get 5,000 or more members, and that the costs are likely to go down. So the reverse would be true as well. If you're at 1,200 now, if you don't reach that 5,000, at some point, you're going to have to reevaluate the cost.
Well,
right?
the thing that having that $5 million from the state to cover our reserves, that's covered that. So we have less members than that right now. You know, you have to do actuarials based on projected numbers. That's where they came up with it.
Right.
We feel comfortable. The amount of reserves they told us to put in for 5,000 is going to cover the 1,200 potentially that's there now and more. It will cover for a longer period of time. So I don't believe that's going to be an issue.
So, well, okay. It sounds like you just sort of have it both ways there. The number's lower, so we can cover people longer, or the number's bigger, and we'll have more people paying in, and therefore the number will be lower. I don't understand how both scenarios end up with the number being lower, but that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
just at
well, I guess I would explain it to you is that the fewer the number you have, the more volatile the claims are going to be.
Absolutely.
So we don't know how many large claims we're going to have, but if we have a low volume of participants and we get a lot of large claims, then our funding, we don't have the dollar volume coming in to handle the claims. If we have a larger number of participants, then the larger the number, the more credible we can be with our data. So essentially what happens is we get overcharged for the unknown by our actuaries for small numbers. But if the numbers are larger, for full credibility, basically you need 10,000 participants over 10 years. And so when you have 1,200 participants over 3 years, it's so uncredible, or it's not credible data that they end up charging you as if, the same amount of claims came in as if you had the higher number of people, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's more of a, not as much economies of scale, but credibility of data.
Okay, I understand. Thanks for that explanation. So at this point, the request from staff is that we make a recommendation. Sure, go ahead.
No, I have one more question. Where in the budget is administrative costs covered? There is a 60% of the funding for capitalization, 30% to rate subsidy, 10% for prevention and detection. There are no administrative costs in there, and that has to be covered somewhere.
Joe?
The administrative costs are in as part of the break-even cost. Before the capitalization cost is broken out separately because the state has given us the $5 million to capitalize it. And so we're not charging any of the members for the capitalization. But the administrative cost, which runs about 25%, should be is in the break-even cost. And I'm trying to visualize what you're looking at as a budget, but it is in there as part of the overall expenses, and it is part of the break-even cost.
The numbers you're referring to are based on the $5 million we got from the state?
Yes.
That's not budgeted for the administrative costs. That's paid out of the premiums that are paid by the entities.
And you're anticipating 25% of what is paid in will be administrative costs?
Joe, isn't it 15%
Correct.
goes to administration?
So it's 10% for administration, 15% for actuary, auditor, claims administration expense, postage, mailing, marketing, and all of that.
But total's 25?
Yeah, 10 and 15 is what he showed, yeah.
Okay, is that your question?
And that's just a number off the top of my head. It could be 20 but I know that we figure that into our amount as part of our break-even cost.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but keep in mind, this is the first budget year that we've actually had. So there are a lot of, a lot of unknowns, right? So those numbers are estimated a little bit high. And so I do think it's going to probably come back over time. We'll see, obviously. At this time next year, we'll know a lot better.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just my thought on this. This issue, I realize it pertains to public safety insofar as it relates to the fire department, and the extent to which the benefit extends itself beyond other benefits that might be available and is more easily administered and more quickly paid. I see the additional public safety here. I do. But as it is in the first year of the trust, as it is, they have almost no loss experience to gear what their future is going to be. And as they've already said, right, that they don't, that there's just not enough. I mean, it's not their fault. There's not enough here. It seems to me that before this goes before the whole board, this ought to go to Ways and Means, or it ought to go to somebody who is at least looking at the budget implications of the possibility that there could be contributions from member agencies. I realize that's not anticipated, and that may be far-fetched. But it is out there. Also, there's a sense that they're still trying to settle on what the premium dollar is going to be for each individual person. And I would think that just on the basis of that, I'd want to have Ways and Means look at it. Otherwise, if somebody's prepared to make a motion to send it to the full board now, I'm fully capable of talking about that too.
Just not getting their pamphlet tonight. I can't make a decision or make a recommendation at this meeting. Maybe at a future meeting, but I can't make it tonight.
I'm concerned about the long-term commitment. If someone is diagnosed, then we are obligated to continue our contributions for years. And I'd like to have more people look at the long-term,
With
what
that
the
in mind,
district would do
Is there
long-term.
somebody on the committee that wants to make a motion to send this to Ways and Means?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? No further discussion? Let's have a roll call vote.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 10, thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Just as a quick follow-up, I will provide written responses on the city attorney's questions, and if there are other legal issues that are related to this.
That would help. That would really
I'll
help.
remain in contact.
And I appreciate you being here tonight, and I appreciate you answering the questions as well as you have, and the people on the phone, we didn't get a chance to see them, but the information was very helpful.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 10A is citizen comments. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address the board, or anybody online who wishes to address the board on a public safety issue?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, and there's nobody here who has made a motion. Having no additional items on the agenda, I declare this meeting adjourned.